course. It's a 6 weeks course where we're going to take this journey, making 6 stops along the way on different aspects of Judaism. I'm sure you well understand that in 6 weeks we're only going to be touching on the surfaces of Judaism. I don't want you to feel after 6 weeks that you graduated Judaism. You got your master's degree in Judaism. You're now scholars, although you all are scholars. But what this course is meant to do is to whet your appetite on every of the subjects that we touch upon, so that you want to study more, you want to discover more, you want to learn more, you want to connect more. But we'll try to pack in as much as we possibly can into each week. Just quickly, upcoming classes. You see the catalog is in front of you. Tomorrow, Rabbi Levine has 2 classes, both on Kabbalistic concepts. There is an afternoon class at 12:30 called Going Kabbalistic. There's an evening class at 8 o'clock. It's a 3-week course. It's called The Journey of the Soul. And it's where does the soul come from before life? Where does the soul go to after life? And what's the soul busy doing during life? So 3 weeks with Rabbi Levine on Thursday. And Monday evening we have a very, very powerful lecture. Dvori Kreiman going to be speaking. You have the flyer in front of you. Taking on the impossible. When life hands you lemons and even the lemonade tastes bitter. It's a very powerful lecture and I look forward to seeing you here. If you register online and you put in the promo code alumni, it'll automatically give you 50% off for that lecture. Living Judaism. The subject tonight, God, Torah, and the chosen people. I'll start off with this statement. A Jew is something you are. It's not what you belong to. It's not a club. It's the very essence of who you are. Therefore, the study of it is different than any other study. Meaning, if you were to sign up in any course in any university on whether it may be philosophy, mathematics, art, whatever it may be that fascinates you, and study it well and do well on any exams, you've accomplished gaining wisdom. And perhaps wisdom on a subject you care about, that's dear to you, or you need for your career. The study of Judaism is different because this is a study about yourself. This is a study about your essence. That would be similar to if you were to take a class about your ancestors. You would feel very different than if it was about George Washington, because this is your Zaidi, your Bubby. Well, the study of Judaism is about your soul. It's about your essence. It's about your very being. You know, perhaps I'll start with the story of a princess. There was this king. Many of the parables we use is always with a king. And the king has this princess. And he's waiting for there to be a wedding, a royal wedding. And every date that she goes on, she has something faulty to say about the guy. She doesn't like the guy. This was a prince from this country. This is from this country. She always had something critical to say. And years are going by, and the king would like there to be, a continuity to this kingdom. Someone, something. Nothing doing. And suddenly, in such frustration with his daughter there, he says, you know what? I'm tired of waiting already. This is what we're going to do. The next single male that walks through that door, you're going to marry. That's it. Come on in. There's seats. Oh, this is not part of the story, folks. I said the next single male that walks in. And a decree from the king is a decree. The king said it. And all the advisors are saying, oh no. And they hear footsteps in the hallway. And the door opens. And it's the royal gardener who's coming to talk about the rose bushes that he's putting in the garden. And he happens to be single. Mazel tov, they say. This is the future prince. And everyone's going, oh my God, what are we going to do here? The king and the princess, the gardener saying, wow, my lucky day. He's now a prince. But a decree from the king is a decree. And so the royal wedding takes place and the princess marries the gardener. Big wedding. The king is a little bit embarrassed that this is the future prince. So he says, listen here folks, you need to practice being a king, because one day you're going to be king and queen of this kingdom. So I'm going to send you to a distant island there you can practice being the king and queen. And he sends them away. He sends them with whatever he thinks that they would need for some period of time. But he miscalculated and things run out rather quickly. And they're stuck on this island, this prince and princess practicing king and queen. Time goes by and the princess realizes, this guy's a nice guy. He really is sweet. He's far nicer than any one of the other guys that I dated. And she really falls in love with him. She likes him. She enjoys him. He's sweet. He's sincere. He's innocent. There's something about him that she really likes. But every once in a while, she gets depressed. And she gets depressed because she misses the palace. She misses the luxury. She misses everything about the palace. The royal gowns, the jewelry, the culture, the art. It's not on this island. So every once in a while she goes into this depression. And her sweet husband sees it and he feels for her. He doesn't quite understand it. But he feels that there's something wrong. And so he's a gardener. He knows the field. So he goes and he brings her the most beautiful tomatoes that he planted. And he really brings in a beautiful basket. Here, my dear princess, I have brought you some tomatoes. Perhaps it will bring some joy to your heart. I want to see you smile again. And she's so like, you're so sweet. You're so sweet. Thank you so much. A while later, he sees still the sadness, and so he brings some potatoes. Here, my dear princess, I've brought you some potatoes. And a week later, she's still sad, and he brings some cucumbers. And he keeps trying, he's trying, and the princess finally says to her husband, you're the sweetest person in the world, and I really appreciate the gifts, the tomatoes and the potatoes and the cucumbers. But what you simply don't understand is that I was raised in a palace, and I was raised with all the luxuries that a person can ever dream of, and that's what I long for. And what are you bringing me? Tomatoes, potatoes, and cucumbers. You mean well, but you just simply can't relate. It's a simple parable, but it's a parable for our existence. You see, our soul comes from this lofty heavenly place, and it's placed within our body. And it's sent into this world. And we're here as a quote-unquote chosen people, which we're going to need to understand what that means. And we're sent into this world, and we go through life, and we marry this body. We're forced into this wedding. The body and the soul get married. We become one. And after a while, we realize, you know what? I like the body. It's okay. There are things that the body does that I enjoy. And the soul and body become this one unit. And they seem to get along. But every once in a while, the soul feels this yearning for something. It wants something deeper because it misses the palace. It misses spirituality. It yearns for something deeper. And so what do we do? What do we, the body, do? We feed it. We bring it some tomatoes. We say, here, if I got you a new car, would you be happy? What if I got you a vacation? Would you be happy? If I got you a new wardrobe, would you be happy? And we keep trying to fill that void with tomatoes, potatoes, and cucumbers. Until at some point the soul says to the body, saying, you don't understand. I long for spirituality. I need to feel my essence. I need to feel something deeper. And tomatoes and potatoes and cucumbers won't exactly cut it for us. That's the story of the Jew. And that's what we're trying to find in our lives. We're always searching. We're always yearning. There's a reason why Jewish people make up such a large percentage of so many of the cults that are out there. Because we're a searching people. We're a yearning people. We're always trying to find something. We're trying to find our very essence. Now let's talk a little bit about the Jewish people, but let's take it from some other perspectives. I prepared the sheets for you, though it should have been on the table. If you go to page number 2, let's see what Mark Twain happened to say about the Jewish people. If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 1% of the human race. It suggests a nebulous dim puff of stardust lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. Properly, the Jew ought hardly to be heard of, but he is heard of, has always been heard of. He is as prominent on the planet as any other people, and his commercial importance is extravagantly out of proportion to the smallness of his bulk. His contribution to the world's list of great names in literature, science, art, music, finance, medicine, and abstruse learning are always way out of proportion to the weakness of his numbers. He has made a marvelous fight in this world in all the ages and has done it with his hands tied behind him. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptians, the Babylonians, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other peoples have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but have burned out, and they sit in twilight now, or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? Mark Twain tried to figure us out. There's something about them different than any other people. As much as the world tries to stamp them out, they're always there, and they're always there contributing even more to society. They shouldn't be, and yet they are. Let's read the next one. The Jew is that sacred being who has brought down from heaven the everlasting fire and has illuminated with it the entire world. He is the religious source, spring, and fountain out of which all rest of the people have drawn their beliefs and their religions. Let's go to President John Adams. I will insist that the Hebrew have done more to civilize men than any other nation. If I were an atheist and believed in blind eternal fate, I should still believe that fate had ordained the Jews to be the most essential instrument for civilizing the nations. If I were an atheist of the other sect who believed or pretend to believe that all is ordered by chance, I should believe that chance had ordered the Jews to preserve and propagate to all mankind the doctrine of a supreme, intelligent, wise, almighty sovereign of the universe, which I believe to be the great essential principle of all morality and consequently of all civilizations. If anyone has ever written any of historian Paul Johnson's works, which I recommend, Paul Johnson's a Christian. He writes history of many, many religions. He writes, all the great conceptual discoveries of the intellect seem obvious and inescapable once they have been revealed. But it requires a special genius to formulate them for the first time. The Jews had this gift. To them we owe the idea of equality before the law, both divine and human, of the sanctity of life and the dignity of the human person, of the individual conscience and so of personal redemption, of the collective conscience and so of social responsibility, of peace as an abstract ideal and love as the foundation of justice, and many other items which constitute the basic moral furniture of the human mind. Without the Jews, it might have been a much emptier place. And I'll conclude these quotes with Milton Himmelfarb. He writes, each Jew knows how thoroughly ordinary he is. Isn't that interesting? It's just a great line, because it's so true. It's interesting, and I'm going to touch upon this a little bit later. We seem to be uncomfortable ourselves with that word chosen. When we hear it, we do a little bit of this right away, because what do you mean by that? Make sure it doesn't mean that we're better than anyone else. We're afraid of, we're not racist. The world knows we're chosen. We're uncomfortable with it. We're going to have to make peace with it tonight. Because we feel ordinary. And that's what Milton Himmelfarb says. Each Jew knows how thoroughly ordinary he is. Yet taken together, we seem caught up in things great and inexplicable. Yet we're always involved in those great things. The number of Jews in the world is smaller than a small statistical error in the Chinese census. Yet we remain bigger than our numbers. Big things seem to happen around us. Just some quotes to throw out to you. I could have gone on and on, but I just wanted to whet your appetite a little bit with who are we? What are we? Why are we? It all begins with God. Everything that we talk about the Jewish people, Torah, chosenness, God plays the central role. There is no Judaism without God. We're not just a social club. We're not even a religion, as I said this afternoon. Don't confuse, say there's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's simply not true. We're not a religion. So the atheistic Jew is just as Jewish as Moses. Because we're not a religion. We're a people. And if you're part of the people, you're part of the people. We will try to explain how the people should behave, how the people should practice, why the people should practice. But if one does not, it doesn't exclude them from being part of the people. You know, the simple prayer that we say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Hear, O Israel, God our God, God is one. Right there is the very essence. A belief that we have one God, no partners. And this God, this one God, is a creator of heaven and earth. And He's infinite, and He's all-knowing, and He's all-encompassing. God allows us a glimpse of Himself through the Torah. So although He's infinite, within the text of the Torah, He authors this book because from a book you get to know the author. If you really read an author's works, you get a sense of you're intimate with that author. God gives us a Torah because within that Torah we're able to get a glimpse, an understanding, a closeness of the author of God. Our faith and knowledge of God is not theory, it's not speculation, but it's recorded fact. Without this connection to this fact, to this truth, we don't have an ism of Judaism. Judaism is the only religion in the world, if you want to still call it a religion, that doesn't rely on an individual to ascertain its truth. In all religions, there is a prophet. The prophet had a prophecy, a revelation from God, an individual revelation from God, and then shared that prophecy with a group of people, whatever size group that may be. Each religion slightly different. But it all has God revealing themselves to an individual. The people believe that individual to be a prophet, speaking the truth, and therefore they believe it. The exception is Judaism. Because there the Torah tells us there was a revelation not to an individual. Yes, we have prophets, and we have plenty of prophets. But the initial revelation was to all the Jewish people. Not to one, but to 2 million. That my Zaidi and Babi and your Zaidi and Babi were all there. Our ancestors were there and all heard the revelation simultaneously and all compared notes. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear that? That's what the Torah records. That's what the Torah states. A revelation to all, so that it is not belief in one human being, but we're all believing in a fact that's been passed on by our ancestors. In the same type of way, if I were to ask you who was the first president of the United States, I would say a majority of you would pick up your hands and say George Washington. At least I would hope. If I was to then say, and how do you know? You would tell me because you went to school and you studied in your history class. And if I was to say, how do you know your teacher told you the truth? You would say, I don't know. But there was a history textbook there that said the same thing. And I would say, textbooks, you can go to countries where they invent history books and change history. How do you know that was true? Well, my parents told me it's a good teacher. My parents told me it's a good school. My other friend went to another school and their teacher told them the same thing. But ultimately I can keep saying, and how do you know there wasn't a conspiracy of the teachers? How do you know this wasn't invented 100 years ago? Maybe there was a different first president of the United States. Conspiracy theorists do this. The answer is simple. We know George Washington was the first president of the United States because grandparents were there at the inauguration. Because there were people alive at the time and they all passed on to their children. Guess what? This is who he was, this is what he looked like, and he was elected the first president of the United States. Eyewitness testimony. When you have eyewitness testimony that's backed up by history books, that's backed up by every single teacher, you accept it as fact. When we have within Judaism a belief in a revelation not to an individual but to all people, all of our Zaydis and Babis were there. They all passed it on to the next generation and to the next and to the next. At no point in history did anyone say, it's not true, my grandparents didn't tell me this story. Everyone agreed that this is the exact same story that was passed on. The Torah scroll has over 300,000 letters in it. 304,000 letters in that scroll. There are scrolls in every part of the world. There are scrolls that date back who knows how long. We have yet to find one scroll different than the other in any part of the world. Our grandparents all told us the same story. Whether we're religious, whether we're not, whether we're totally secular, everyone in this room had a great bubby somewhere that celebrated the holiday of Passover. And guess what she ate on Passover night? Matzah. Everyone agrees throughout the world, every Jew in every culture, before there was an internet that could have spread a conspiracy. We all ate matzah. Why? Because we were all passed on the same exact story. There were no two different stories. There's no culture that said, we didn't eat matzah, we ate this. No, we ate matzah. They didn't have spinach at the Seder table. It was matzah. On the doorpost where you walk in, there's something called a mezuzah. That mezuzah is found in every single part of the world. It has the exact same letters in it in every single part of the world. Every part of the Jewish community has it because there was eyewitness testimony. Now, again, I don't want to devote too much time on any one given subject because I have a lot that I want to carry. But I want to just take some of the theories that are out there. Ezra wrote the Torah. This one wrote the Torah. Samuel wrote the Torah. All these other theories. Let's just practice one. Let's just see how it goes. Suppose I was Ezra. I was alive in Ezra's period of time. You're all my fans. You like me because I'm Ezra. Right? And I come to you and I say, guess what? I just authored a new book, and I want you guys to go out there and sell it to the rest of the people. And you were to open this book. And this book said stories that your Bubbies and Zadies never told you happened. I wrote these stories. I invented stories. I created characters of stories. Remember, the book says that this book was presented by God to Moses at Sinai. But here I am, I'm Ezra giving you the book. You never heard about the book yesterday because it didn't exist according to this theory. Someone's going to pick up their hand and say, Ezra, this story is not true. Because this book says it was presented in the year 2448 after creation. You're giving it to us now. It wouldn't sell. You can't sell a book of lies to all the people. You can sell lies to some of the people. You can't sell a book of lies to all of the people, especially if accepting the lies causes persecution. It doesn't make you wealthy if you accept it. Guess what if you accept it? You have to start keeping Shabbat. You have to start keeping kosher. You have to start keeping mikveh. Really, we're not a stupid people. There is no way we're going to accept a book of lies that's going to tell us when we can have sex with our own spouses, what food we can eat, what we can do on the Sabbath, that we can't eat a few times a day on the year on fast days. Why would we accept it? Why would we buy into it? There's only one reason we buy into it. Bubby said it happened. Zadie said it happened. My Bubby Zadie, your Bubby Zadie, your Bubby Zadie, the Jewish family in Australia's Bubby Zadie. We all say this happened. It doesn't mean we're all religious. It doesn't mean we're all observant. It doesn't mean we're all practicing. But we all know these are the traditions of our people. And somehow it collectively got passed on to all of us exactly with these exact letters of the Torah. That's the 5 books of Moses. There is an oral Torah as well. You may have heard words such as Talmud. You ever hear the word Talmud? You've ever heard the word the Mishnah? What is these words, Talmud and Mishnah? This is part of what's called the oral Torah. The oral Torah is that when God gives Moses the Torah and teaches Moses the Torah, he teaches it with explanations. I used the mezuzah as an example before, right? It says, it's a biblical verse that says you should have a mezuzah on your doorpost. That's a biblical verse. It's part of the Shema. Can any of you tell me what a mezuzah is? Well, if you can point to it on the doorpost and you say, that's a mezuzah. What's inside the case? It's a piece of parchment. What's on the parchment? The Shema Yisrael, right? Nowhere in the text of the Torah does it say that that's what a mezuzah should be. It simply says, put a mezuzah on your doorpost. What's a mezuzah? I have no doubt, it's only logical, that when God said to Moses, tell the Jewish people to put a mezuzah on their doorpost, Moses did something like this. Can I ask a question now? What's a mezuzah? Oh, you want to know what a mezuzah is? This is what a mezuzah should be. You should put tefillin on your arms and on your heads. What's tefillin? So our English language comes up with a translation called phylacteries. That really helps us out. Put phylacteries on your hand and on your head. It sounds like a disease. What's tefillin? Somehow we all know it's tefillin. We all know what tefillin are. Every part of the world, every part of the Jewish world, every part of Jewish culture knows exactly what tefillin are. Oral Torah. Transmitted in the oral Torah, which means the commentary. What does that mean is part of the oral transmission. That's discussed in the Talmud. That's discussed in the Mishnah. You're familiar with the word kosher, right? Kosher is not just that the animals have to be kosher, but the animals have to be prepared in a kosher way. What's a kosher way? Kosher slaughter. That the kosher has to be by a shochet, it has to be a very specific way. The Torah says you shall slaughter kosher animals the way you were taught by the foot of the mountain. What does that tell me? There were classes by the foot of the mountain of exactly how to do this. That's part of oral transmission. The Torah tells us as follows. Man was created in the image of God. God creates a world within 6 days. All of creation, every detail, everything that was to ever be is created in these 6 days. All the potential for everything that's created is created in these 6 days, and then he has one more creation to make. And that creation is the human being. When he creates the human being, he says, this creation is different than all other creations, and he says this famous line, man is created in the image of God. What does that mean? Man, this creation is going to be different than all of the other creations, different than the planets, different than the minerals, different even than the animals, different than the fruits and vegetations, in that we will partner with God to continue this act of creation. We're going to continue to progress the world forward. We're going to move the world forward because we're going to have intelligence, and we're going to have the ability to communicate one with the other. We're going to have the ability to use this intelligence to advance the world, to continue taking that which God created and advance it. So to take from the raw material that God created within this world and ultimately create an iPhone. It'll take thousands of years, it'll take a lot of smart people, but he gave that gift not to the animal world, not to the vegetable world. The rose bush will never come up with an iPhone, the human being will. But along with that came a challenge to this human being, and that's where we are created in God's image. They're the only creation that really has true free choice. Choice means to use your intellect to make a decision, to do this or to do that. Ultimately, he says, I want you to utilize that free choice to do good, not to do bad. Because if you're creating these human beings can utilize that free choice and can destroy one another. They can harm one another. They can even murder one another. They can rape one another. I want you to utilize that free choice in a godlike way. A godlike way means in something good, in something holy. How long did it last? The experiment, what I would call take one. Let's start the world off. We're going to have Adam and Eve. Okay, Adam and Eve, we're going to try an experiment. We're going to see if this free choice works. We're going to start off with something real simple, kindergarten level. You can have any fruit tree you want in this garden. There's only one tree you can't eat from. Everything else is yours to enjoy. It lasted an hour. The serpent, the story of Eve and Adam, they ate. Okay, take two. Let's start again. So Adam and Eve are now out of the Garden of Eden, and now in the world as we kind of know it, where they have to plant, they have to work the fields, they're going to have children, they have Cain and Abel. What happens there? Oops, that didn't work out. Take two didn't really work too well. We have the first murder in the first family of the first existence of man. And we continue to go. The very first two portions of Genesis continues to show us failure after failure after failure of mankind utilizing their free choice and failing at it. The story of Noah and the flood, classic story, where everyone is wicked, everyone is robbing from another, with the exception of one family. We're going to save this one family, we're going to take 5, we're going to start the world all over again. There's a story about the Tower of Babel, where they're building this large tower in what's modern day Iraq. They're building this tower so that they can wage war against God. If he ever tries to bring that flood again, we're going to go to the top of the tower, we're going to wage war against him. Again, failure of mankind. we go through 2,000 years of continued failure. And then God comes up with the next plan. And the next plan is that we're going to find a human being that wants to take upon themselves this responsibility of convincing their fellow man to do the right thing, to do good. It's a huge responsibility. And he selects an individual named Abraham. He's first called Abram in the Bible, then his name is changed to Abraham. He becomes the patriarch of the Jewish people because he was different than everyone else. He cared about other people. He invited guests into his home. He believed in monotheism. He believed in one God, not many gods. He didn't bow to idols like his father did. He was different in so many ways. God said, that's my candidate. And there's communication in the Torah. The Torah records the communication, the conversations that take place between God and Abraham. And we don't have the time to get into all those conversations, but I want to start with the very first one because it's an extremely important one. Because that's where God is laying out what this experiment is all about. And ultimately, what are we doing here? And he says, if you follow my ways and you teach it to your children, you will bring blessings to all the families on the face of the earth. Let's remember that, because that's the ultimate answer to it all. You will bring blessings to all the families on the face of the earth. It's about making the world a better place. It's not just about making it a better place for Jews. It was never about Abraham just becoming this select nation and therefore the rest of the world, they're no good. No, it's about teaching the rest of the world to be good so that you will bring them a blessed life. Everything about Abraham, everything about Isaac, everything about Jacob, everything about Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, everything about your grandmother and your grandfather, everything about us is about Vayehei bracha. We are to be a blessing. That's what we're supposed to contribute to the world, to be a blessing. To bring the world to its purpose, to teach the world the right way, to teach the world what is right and what is wrong. And when we see wicked and we see evil, to speak up against it. This has always been part of our mission, part of who we are. God makes this covenant with Abraham, and he promises him that his nation will be an eternal nation, that it will live on, that it will be there through the end of days. You know, we talk about, and I'm going off on a tangent here for a moment, validity of Torah. How does one know validity of Torah? And I know many struggle with this. How does one know? And there are seminars that just focus on this subject of validity of Torah. How do we know that it's real? The simplest answer, the truest answer, by the way, I say, is study it. Because if one studies it, one really senses this truth here. But there's also prophecy in the Torah. Prophecy that only the author would have possibly known if the author was God. A human being would not put their reputation on the line on predicting something 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now, 3,000 years from now, unless they knew. Where God says this nation will survive until the end of times, how do you know it will? How many superpowers came along and tried to wipe the Jewish people off the map, and yet we're here? Interesting that he makes the same promise to another nation, Ishmael. He says Ishmael will be there till the end of time. And guess what? Ishmael is still there till the end of time. Every prophecy in the Torah comes true before the eyes of all the world. This is why all religions accept the concept of the Old Testament coming from God. They'll question whether we've lost the rights to be the chosen people. They'll question whether it was really Isaac, maybe it was really Ishmael, and therefore they are the chosen people. But they will not deny the statements of the Old Testament because it's prophetic. I'll give you a simple example, just a very simple one. It's not one of the famous ones. It's so there that any verse you study, you pick up and you say, my goodness, how could I have missed that? The Torah talks about where Jacob buries his wife. And it talks about that she was buried on the road near Bethlehem. And then the Torah says this very strange verse. That is the burial site of Rachel, that is regarded as her burial site and marked until this very day. until this very day. Literally. That means when you're studying it, you should know, you will know where the burial of Rachel is. You can't make such a prediction thousands of years ago that someone's burial site will always be known. Yet the burial site of Rachel, through every single time that Israel was taken over by another country and another country and another country, they always knew where Rachel's burial site was. Marked till this very day. Simple example. I'll give you one more. In the book of Deuteronomy, where the Torah goes ahead and gives us the names of the animals, how do you know an animal is a kosher animal? So the Torah gives us signs. There are two signs that an animal is kosher. One, it has split hooves, and the second, that it chews its cud. Two different signs. If an animal chews its cud and has split hooves, it's a kosher animal and you can eat it. That was the instruction. Okay? And maybe Moses needed to teach us what does it mean to chew its cud. We needed to understand that. Fine, we got some lesson on what the definition of split hooves are. Then the Torah goes on and says the following. But this you shall not eat from among those that bring up their cud and have a completely separated split hoof. The camel, the hare, the hyrax, for they bring up their cud, but their hoof is not split. They are unclean to you. And the pig, for it has a split hoof, but not the cud. It's unclean to you. Okay? It tells us these animals you can't eat. You know why you can't eat it? Because it only has one of the two signs. I want to ask you a question. If I was your teacher, and I was to say, in order for an animal to be kosher, it must have two signs. That's its definition. Must have both. And I repeat it, must have both. Do I need to continue and say, but this animal you can't eat because it only has one? You know that already. The Torah doesn't waste words. You already know. I told you it must have two. Why does it list 4 animals by name? 4 animals by name. You can't eat these animals because it only has one sign. I know that from the prior verse where it says I have to have 2 signs. It always bothered the commentaries. Why these extra verses? And here's a fascinating thing. At any period of time that you want to imagine the Torah was given, clearly it's thousands of years ago. I believe at Mount Sinai, the year 2448. Well, at any point you want to give it, whoever wrote this knew that in the history of the world, every animal that was ever discovered, there have only been 4 animals discovered in the entire world that only have one sign. These 4. A human being would not know the animals in every single part of the world thousands of years ago. These are ways that the author was putting in signs. I want you to know the one that's writing this knows all the animals because he created all the animals on the face of the earth. I can go on and on and on for hours like this to show you validity, which means the more you study this book, the more you realize, it had to have come from God. Now, what does that mean to you? That's a different story. But that the book itself is something of truth. That the book itself, there's a reason why our ancestors were willing to give up their very lives for this book. There's a reason. It's a godly book. So in this book, God tells us our early history before he gets into the laws. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. What happens after Abraham, Isaac, Jacob? Story of Joseph. You know that one, right? Famous story of Joseph. Let's move on. What happens after that? We end up in Egypt. The story of Joseph brings us into the land of Egypt. What happens in Egypt? We're familiar with that. We become slaves in Egypt. How long are we there? We're 210 years of slavery in Egypt. And then God takes us out with a mighty hand with the plagues against the Egyptians. And that's when he brings us to Sinai to make us, quote unquote, this chosen people. And the simple question is why? Why did we have to go through this exile? Why did we have to go through all of this? If you want to bring us to the promised land, Abraham was living in the promised land, we should have just started the Jewish people right then. What's this detour of the story? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob living in the promised land, then Jacob getting exiled, going down to Egypt. We're stuck in Egypt, we're there for a few hundred years. There's a Pharaoh story, a splitting of the Red Sea story, and then on to the desert for 40 years there until we end up coming back into the promised land. And the answer is, if we're going to become this chosen people, if we're going to become this eternal nation, if we're going to have to become this people that are going to have to take whatever the world will throw our way and stay firm, then we needed to be a people that was completely molded by God. What do I mean? Strictly stripped of everything. We were slaves. We had nothing. We had no freedom. We had no rights. We had no wealth. We had nothing. If it were not for God taking us out and making us who we are. That's why the Exodus is so paramount to who we are, what we are. That's why Passover is so important. Interesting, the very first of the 10 Commandments. I am God, your God. Who? Anyone know the rest of the line? Who took you out of the land of Egypt. What's the obvious question? Why not I am God, your God, who created you? Isn't that bigger? I am God, your God, who created the world. I am God, your God, the infinite one. Why I am God, your God, who took you out of Egypt? And the answer is, who took you out of Egypt is personal to us. Created the world, I wasn't there. Going out of Egypt, I was. My bubby was, at least. It affected me. It affected who I am, what I am. After Sinai, God comes and gives us all of these commandments. 613 commandments. I'm sorry to tell you, it wasn't just 10. There was 613 of them. In every single aspect of our lives, we have commandments. Commandments that keep us holy, keep us separate in many ways, keep us with our own way of life. Why? Because we need to live on. We need to survive as a nation. You survive as a nation when you have your own culture, when you have your own traditions. Each of these mitzvot are aspects of sparks of holiness. Every single one of them God has designed for us so that we will survive, so that we will be blessed, so that we will give forth blessings. That's a very short summary of who we are. Have we been successful at it? If we're meant to be a chosen people, have we been successful? What grade would we give ourselves? What grade do you think God would give us as a people? It's a tough question. It's a hard question. Pessimistic speaker will tell you, give yourself a failing grade. How many Jews kept the faith? How many Jews stay the course? How many Jews practice today? For every one that's sitting here, there's 1,000 that have no interest. But I don't believe in pessimism. Not at all. That there's a single Jew that still identifies as a Jew is a miracle. After what the world put us through, post-Holocaust, and guess what? Judaism is thriving. There's still identifiable Jews. There's still a group of Jews that want to get together on a Wednesday night and study together. Wow.
That's a miracle.
It's a miracle. Every single walking Jew is a miracle. Have we done a great job? We've done an amazing job. We've influenced the world in far more ways than we know. And I'll get to that tonight. So that you feel good about yourselves. You feel good about your ancestors. You feel good about the sacrifice that we went through. Because we have done a phenomenal job. Can we do better? Of course we can do better. We could always do better. I'll give you another parable break. There was this father, successful businessman. He had a son that did not do well in school at all. The son would hang out in his room and do nothing all day. The father felt terrible. He's got to do something with his son. So he calls his son out of his room one day and he says, "Son, it's time you become a businessman." The son says, "But I don't know how to do business." He says, "It's really overrated. It's simple. The whole concept of business is you buy wholesale, you sell retail. That's what it's all about. You go to a place where you can buy in bulk." He explains to him what bulk is. When you buy in bulk, you pay a cheaper price. You then take that same product and you sell it retail, one item at a time. When you sell something retail, you sell it at a higher price. When you sell out all of those items, you've made a profit. What do? You reinvest. You take all that money, you go back to the marketplace, you buy another item. Wholesale price. You come back, you sell it retail. You continue doing this all your life, you'll become wealthy like me. The son says, "That's it? That's it. And I'm going to start you off. Here's your first sack of gold coins. Go to the wholesale marketplace. You pick a product. Buy something wholesale. Bring it back to town. Sell it retail. And you'll be in business. The son says, this is so much better than school. I love this stuff. I'm a businessman. He takes the sack of gold coins. He goes to the marketplace. He's standing there waiting to buy something wholesale. Some hungry businessman sees this little kid there with a sack of gold coins. And he says, son, would you like to buy something wholesale? Wow, this is easy. Yes, I would. Come with me. And they go to a warehouse. And in this warehouse there are 10 wagons. All 10 wagons, he says, for one sack of gold coins. Wow. All 10. All 10. What's in them? He says, I'm going to give you millions and millions of toothpicks. All of these wagons are filled with toothpicks. And you will be the owner of millions of toothpicks for one small sack of gold coins. The kid's eyes open wide. Millions. Wow. Millions. Did you hear that? He gives over the sack of gold coins. He comes parading home with 10 wagon loads. And his father's on the front porch. He sees these 10 wagons. He runs to his son. Son, what did you get? What did you get? You're back so soon. Dad, you're going to be so proud of me. I did exactly as you said. I bought something wholesale. Millions of toothpicks. Toothpicks? All of these wagons have toothpicks. The toothpick, you have more toothpicks than this town will ever have teeth. What are we going to do with millions of toothpicks? It's a small little town. What did you do? What did you do? Are you stupid? And the boy's all insulted. He followed exactly what he was told. He did what he was told. Why is he being called stupid? And he runs to his room crying. A few days go by and the father thinks it over and he realizes the son was right. He didn't really teach him the art of picking the product. He calls his son out and he says, it was my fault. I'm sorry for calling you stupid. You're not stupid. I didn't teach it to you. There's something called marketing. Marketing means you need to think, how will we sell the product? Is this a product that could sell? Is this a product that people could use? Think before you buy. Don't let them talk you into something. Dad, I won't let you down. I'll invest another sack of gold coins. The father says he's off to the marketplace. He's there with another sack of gold coins, but this time he will not be taken advantage of. Hungry businessman comes over to him and says, son, would you like to buy something wholesale? He looks him straight in the eye. Not so fast. Depends what the product is. Is it a product that people need? Come with me, son. To the warehouse they go. 10 wagons. What's in the wagons? Shofars, ram's horns. It's 3 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. What could be better? You can picture the ad now. Get your shofar in time for Rosh Hashanah. Wow, this is good, this is good. Gives over the sack of gold coins, comes parading home with 10 wagon loads filled with shofars. The father's waiting on the front porch. Son, what did you get? Dad, I didn't let you down. This time I did exactly as you said. I thought before I bought. Shofars. Shofars. This town has one synagogue. Everyone belongs to that one synagogue. That one synagogue's got 10 shofars. Who's buying their own shofar? And he starts yelling at his kid again. The kid runs back to his room crying. A few days go by. The father already forgets about the son. That's a lost cause. But he's got another problem. He's got a beautiful estate. But right now, both of his driveways on the right side of the house and the left side of the house are being blocked with wagons. He's got 10 wagon loads of toothpicks on one side of the house. He's got 10 wagon loads of shofars on the other side of the house. He's got to get rid of them. So he calls a professional trader, a barter, and he says, I want you to get rid of these 10 wagon loads of toothpicks. I don't care what you sell it for. I don't care what you trade it for. Just get it off my property. Sends him on his way. Calls another professional tradesman. You see these 10 wagon loads of shofars? I want it off my property. Get rid of it. I don't care what you sell it for. I don't care what you trade it for. Just get rid of it. He sends him on his way. He's sitting a few days later, he's relaxing on his front porch, and suddenly he sees a cloud of dust from the right, a cloud of dust from the left. And as they get closer, and they closer and closer, he bursts out in laughter, and he starts rolling on the floor of the porch in laughter because he realizes that the tradesman with the toothpicks met the tradesman with the shofars, and they swapped. And each one is coming back now with the other guy's junk, and he's back with the same 20 wagons again. They're all coming back home, and he's rolling in laughter. The son hears the laughter. What's so funny, Dad? He says, you don't know what happened. I looked in the yellow pages, professional tradesman. I got a guy for toothpicks. I got to get another guy for shofars. And now guess what? It all came back. And the son's got a straight face. He's not laughing. So the father says, don't you get it? I try to get rid of the junk that you bought, and it's all back again. And the son says, it's not funny. I'm not laughing. When you sent me, a naive kid, you sent me out there and I came back with this junk, what did you do? You called me names. You made fun of me. You hurt my feelings. Now you send professionals. They come back with the same junk. Now you're laughing? Why don't you call them names? Why don't you call them stupid? Now it's funny. To which the father says, son, I'm sorry for calling you names. There was no excuse for that. However, don't compare the two. Them I sent out with junk. They came back with junk. But you I sent with gold. When you're sent with gold, you got to come back with gold. It's a nice story. Never happened. But it's a parable for us. We're sent into this world with gold. That which our ancestors went through, the lessons and the messages and the history and the heritage and the traditions and the mitzvot that they passed on for thousands of years from one generation to the next generation to the next generation, so that they dreamed that one day maybe there'll be a country where we can be free, where we can actually stand up as Jews and speak up. Gold. Are we investing that gold? Are we utilizing that gold? Or we're coming back with toothpicks and shofars? So yeah, I still give us an A, but we can always push for that A+. We can always invest that gold. We can utilize this gift of living at this period of time with so much freedom, with so much wealth as a Jewish people in comparison to other periods of time. We all ate breakfast, lunch, or dinner today, at least one of the meals. Couldn't always be said about our grandparents and great-grandparents. We each have the ability to go to synagogue once a week, 3 times a day, once a month, but we can go. No one's going to throw stones at us for doing it. We can make Friday night Shabbat dinner in our houses and we're not going to have to hide from our neighbors to do it. We can in fact invite our neighbors to do it. We can invest this gold. There's another quick story, then I want to get into the subject of chosen people. There was this famous chassid named Zusha. Zusha was a great chassid. He always had these great lines. And one day Zusha said to his fellow chassidim, he said the following: when my time is up, and after 120 years I come up to the heavenly world, many people think about that time and they're frightened. They're afraid. They live in fear of what it's going to be like on Judgment Day. So I often imagine my Judgment Day. If I was to come before God and God would say, Zusha, why weren't you like Abraham? Why didn't you live like a life like Abraham? I will break out in laughter. Fear, ha! Abraham, God, you want to know why I wasn't like Abraham? How many times did you speak to Abraham? How many miracles did you do for Abraham? When was the last time you spoke to me? He's going to ask me about Abraham? I'll laugh him in the face. And then I'll pick another character and I'll say, and why weren't you like Moses? I don't remember seeing a burning bush. I don't remember being given a staff that can perform miracles. Moses, you want to know why I wasn't like Moses? I'll laugh God in the face. He wants to know why I'm not like King David. He wants to know why I wasn't like King Solomon. He wants to know why I wasn't like this one. I'd laugh at him. There's only one question I fear. There's only one question that I shudder and think. Zusha, why weren't you like Zusha could have been? That's the question. We don't have to measure ourselves to others. We have to measure ourselves to our potential. We know our potential. We know what we could do. We know what we can contribute to the Jewish people. We know what we can contribute to the world. We know the gifts that God gave us. We know that we have the abilities to do more. Question yourselves. Hasidism does not believe in judging others. We're not judgmental to others. Whether a person is the most religious, the least religious, it doesn't matter. We judge ourselves. And we help each other. We help each other on this journey. Let's touch a little bit on this chosen people thing, because it's so misunderstood. So many people hear that word chosen people, as I mentioned earlier, and they wonder, does it touch a little bit upon racism? Does it say that we're better than anyone else? And so there's the discomfort. There are those that would say that nowhere in the text of the Bible do you actually find those words, chosen people. And it's simply not true, because it's found throughout the Bible. God says to Abraham, God says to Isaac, God says to Jacob that He's selecting them. He says to Abraham that it will be only a selection from Isaac. It will not be his son Ishmael. He says to Isaac it'll only be from Jacob, not from Esau. He says to Jacob it'll be all of the 12 tribes of Israel. Each time clearly there's a selection taking place. And then He says in Deuteronomy, for you are a holy people to God your God. Hashem your God has chosen you to be for Him a treasured people on the face of the earth, not because you are numerous, more numerous than all the people did God desire you and choose you, for you are the fewest of all people, rather because of God's love for you and because He observes the oath that He swore to your forefathers. You are chosen. To deny it is to deny the Torah, to deny Judaism. You can't escape it even if you tried. Your soul won't let you escape it, and even if your soul does, the world won't let you escape it. The world knows it. For good or for bad, the world knows it. They either come and hunt down the Jew because you're chosen, or they love the Jew because you're chosen, but they know that you're chosen. It's our job to explain what that means. It's not racist, it's not even arrogant, and it's not offensive. Because over and over in every quote where God is selecting, where God is saying to Abraham, a treasured nation, He'll continuously and always finish that with that line, to bring blessings to all the families on the face of the earth. You're chosen to do a job. That's not arrogant. That's what we call responsibility. That's what we call sacrifice. That's what we call commitment. To be an ambassador. To be an ambassador means you have a job to do to represent your country. And we have to remember at all times, that's what we are. We're God's ambassadors to the world, to the people, to bring godly blessings to all the people. Anyone remember George Shultz, who was Secretary of State during the Reagan administration? One of the jobs of the Secretary of State is to officially appoint all the ambassadors to every single country on the face of the earth. And George Shultz would bring in each ambassador one by one to his office. And to each one, he had this globe on the table, and he would ask the same question. So spin the globe and point to the country that you represent. And everyone would spin the globe and make the same mistake. The ambassador to India would spin it and point to India. And the ambassador to the Soviet Union at that time would point to the Soviet Union. The ambassador to West Germany would point to West Germany. And to each one he said, wrong. And he would point to the United States of America and he would say, that's the country you represent. You may live in Norway. You may live in West Germany. You may live in Belgium. But you're there as an ambassador of the United States of America. That's who you are at all times. We, the Jewish people, we live in every single country on the face of the earth, but wherever we live, we remember first and foremost we're there as God's ambassador to humanity. And yes, it's a great honor to represent God. It's a great honor to fulfill a mission for Him. But let's not forget, it's not the easiest of missions. When the guy is selected to be an ambassador to Libya, he's not the most excited person on the face of the earth. There are some hostile countries in the world. We are an ambassador for God in all periods of time, in all eras, in all parts of the world. And we were given 613 commandments on top of that. And so we say to anyone that says, that's not fair, why do you call yourself chosen? We say, come try it. You want to be God's ambassador too? We allow it. There's an open door policy, but you have to study it. You have to understand what it means to be an ambassador. Sit and study with us the Torah, study the laws, tell us if you want to adopt us as part of your life, and then be part of us. If Judaism is racist, if being chosen is racist, there could never be such a thing as conversion. If something is racist, it means my genes, our blood is better than anyone else's. Well, then you can't convert to that. The greatest of our people were converts to our people. Let me state it even differently. Every one of us are converts to our people. That's what Sinai was all about. We weren't born a Jewish nation. We converted to a Jewish nation at Sinai. And anyone thereafter for the last thousands of years that wanted to did as well. Some of the most famous names of Jewish history, Rabbi Akiva and Ruth and Onkelos, these were converts to Judaism. They rose to the highest levels within Judaism. Messiah will come forth from a descendant of a convert. It's not racist at all. And as I mentioned, if any Gentile still feels it's discriminatory, come on in. Come study with us. Learn and decide. Do you want to be a part of it? And if not, it's okay. Because we don't look down at any other religion. We don't look down at any other faith. Do you know that we are the only religion in the world that doesn't monopolize heaven? Think about it. Every faith monopolizes heaven. Judaism says to the Gentile, you want to get into heaven? Be good. Be good. We don't monopolize it. We don't monopolize relationship with God. We don't say you can only have a relationship with God if you're a Jew. If you're born a non-Jew, you have a non-Jewish relationship with God. You're born a Jew, you have a Jewish relationship. Different roles. Different responsibilities. Chosen for what? So if we're chosen, what are we supposed to do about it, and how do we fulfill this mission? For this, as I mentioned earlier, God gave us a manual book, because to say that we're chosen and not to give us an instruction booklet would be cruel. It was to try to figure out this puzzle. So He gave us a manual, a how to live like a member of the chosen people manual book. And that's the Torah. That's the 5 books of Moses. In an army, you're trained to listen to the commander-in-chief. That's what you're trained over and over. You listen to the rank that's above you. You listen to the commander-in-chief. You may have your own plan, how to be victorious, but that doesn't negate your responsibility to listen to the commander-in-chief and to follow orders. It's easy to question instructions. It's easy to question orders, especially those that we don't understand. But if we have confidence in the general, even if we don't understand the order, you understand the need to subordinate yourself to the higher office. Otherwise, there's no army, there's no mission, and there's no success. So you can ask the question, what does keeping kosher have to do with being a light unto the nations? And how does separating milk and meat bring more blessings to the people on earth? And how will me only eating meat that has been slaughtered properly and salted to remove blood make me a priestly nation? And how does the mitzvah of tefillin, if I put it on every morning, affect the people that are living that are in pain? And how does keeping Shabbat affect goodness and morality of the world? I don't dismiss those questions. They're good questions. But I also believe that the commander-in-chief gave me these commandments and told me, if I do this, this is going to be the net result. That it will bring blessings to all of the world, that it will help the people, that it will help mankind, that it'll help me be more spiritual, it'll help me be more God-focused, it'll help us collectively as a people survive, it'll help us collectively as a people be stronger in our faith, and if we're stronger in our faith, we'll be able to speak out more, and we'll be able to speak up when there's more atrocities in the world to try to stamp it out. And let's repeat it over and over and over in the Torah. You focus on being holy. That's your focus. And you will see that by doing that, you will affect the rest of the world. You were chosen to do the mitzvot. You were chosen to fulfill the commandments that God put before us. That's how we act chosen. So have we influenced the world? You wake up in the morning, get into a car, drive to 7-Eleven, take out a few quarters from your pocket, and buy a newspaper, and go home and read the paper. Did anything just happen that's historic? Did anything just happen that you would say, wow? No. I got up, got into my car, drove to 7-Eleven, bought a newspaper, went home and read it. You would say nothing. Anything revolutionary? No. And yet think about that very same act if you were looking at it 1,000 years ago. You got into a car. What's a car? This box that you can get in that can take you from point A to... You mean you didn't have a horse? I imagine in 20 years from now that it actually you don't even have to drive it. They just tell it what to go and it goes. You went to a store, a 7-Eleven. It's open 24 hours. You can get a Slurpee 24 hours a day. You took out currency. What's currency? You bought a paper, news. News probably is something that's 100 years ago. No, this is what happened yesterday. How do you have something in print that happened yesterday? The simple point I'm making is that which is revolutionary, when you're living within it, is not so revolutionary because you're so used to it. But if you look at it 1,000 years ago, wow, that was revolutionary. We're spoiled because we live in this advanced world, especially those of us that live in a land of freedom, a land of the United States. We just watched, it was my father's 6th yahrzeit recently, and we watched a videotape of an interview in which he allowed someone to ask him questions about his life. And it was a very powerful videotape. And in it he was asked about the Messiah. His belief in the Messiah coming. Does he believe that it's near? And his answer was so brilliant. He said, you're asking a little Polish boy who grew up with anti-Semitism all around him, who had to struggle as a Jew with what was going on throughout the world, who lost his entire family in the Holocaust, who ran from city to city to city as a 16-year-old boy running for his life all alone in the world, who is living now in a country in which I can watch my son open Jewish center after Jewish center. I can watch Jews from all walks of life coming and celebrating Shabbat and Passover and Rosh Hashanahs and Yom Kippurs. I can sit in a Hyatt hotel and see 1,000 people come on Rosh Hashanah. You're asking me if I believe in the Messiah? I watch it every single day. You see, we're spoiled, we're brought up here, we think this is normal. This isn't normal. For thousands of years this wasn't normal. How did we get here? Who deserves the credit for there being a United States of America? How is there such a country with such freedoms? So let me conclude with a little bit from a book that I recommend everyone read. It's called The Gifts of the Jews by Thomas Cahill. I have told class after class, get this book, read it. Not a Jewish book, not written by a Jew, but something every Jew needs to read. The Gifts of the Jews. And Cahill goes through historically how we, the Jewish people, me and you and my Zaidi and Bubby and your Zaidi and Bubby, how we change the world. And he says the world simply doesn't get it because they're not looking at it from a historical perspective. And I'll just go over them briefly. The Jews introduced the world to a new God. There were many gods. The sun was God, the moon was God, the stars were God. Everyone had many gods. My God was stronger than your God. My God wants me to wage war against you. Everyone heard different instructions from their gods as they wanted to hear. They created their own gods. The truest definition of idol worship is not the piece of stone that they would bow to. The truest definition of idol worship is to create self as God. I know best. Worship me. Abraham comes along and begins the fight against this. And therefore, a world today that a majority of the people of the world, in whichever religion they belong to, recognize that there is one God, a creator. That's because there was a Jewish people. The Jew crushed the gods of the man-made gods, destroyed it. There are very few that believe in the man-made gods today. The Jew made man free. If there's a concept of freedom today, it's because of the Jewish people. It's because we carried the message of the Exodus to the world. We didn't keep that story private. We publicized that story. The reason the black community of hundreds of years ago loved the story of Passover is because it gave them hope. That there's a concept of freedom, that there's a drive to freedom, and that freedom is a godly principle. That man is free. That man is made to be free. It's what the Jewish people contributed to the world. The Jewish people gave the world God-based morality. God-based morality means is that there is an authority to morality. If there's no authority to morality, if it's man-made, then man can make any morality that they simply call morality. To use the most extreme example, Hitler created a man-made morality. And his man-made morality said, wipe out anyone that's not like us because it's moral, because it's good. And that's why his Nazis can go ahead and listen to symphony music and have fine wine right after they murdered men, women, and children. Because it was moral. It was taught to them as morality. They didn't think of themselves as evil monsters. The Jewish people fought against this idea and said morality can only be God-based morality. The Jewish people taught the world rest. The work week was always a 7-day work week. You worked every single day. We taught the world, no, you have to stop because there's something more important to life than just work. There's a reason we work, so that we can take it all in, so that we can enjoy our loved ones, we can enjoy our family. We call it the Sabbath. The world can call it Sunday, whatever culture they want, but the idea that there needs to be stop time, rest time, is a Jewish concept. The Jews gave the world the value of education. Education in most societies was just for the few. It was just for the scholars. The Jewish people came and said, no, education is for everyone. We were the first to have a school system, a yeshiva system, a cheder system, that every child needed to be educated. The Jewish people gave the downtrodden a voice. The Jewish people said if you're poor, you still have the same rights as the rich. If you're weak, you still have the same rights as the strong. This is what the Torah taught us, and this is what we taught society. The world wasn't ready for this thousands of years ago. It took us time to bring these concepts to life. How did we do it? Not always by standing up on a soapbox and preaching. We behaved it, we lived it, we practiced it. And when Gentiles would see, hey, it works. Look, they educate their kids. We should do the same. Over time, it rubs off on societies. And this is what Cahill's book does. It shows you how everything good about the world can have its source on a chosen people that were given this mission to live this way so that the rest of the world will learn how to behave. The Jewish people gave the world spirituality. It taught spirituality. It taught belief. And it taught belief, as I mentioned earlier, that it didn't have to be only the Jewish way. There's something called the Noahide laws. For everyone, for all of humanity. The Jewish people taught the world something called human rights. That man is created in the image of God. The Jewish people taught the world the pursuit of peace is equality. The world was all about war, about conquering, about who is stronger, about which nation can take over which nation. The Torah comes along and tells us that man is the custodian of the earth and you need to care about the earth. Environmental concerns and medical concerns. It's your responsibility to find the cure to any disease that's out there. That responsibility the Torah placed on mankind. There's a reason why there's so many Jewish doctors and Jewish lawyers. We were raised with understanding a responsibility to help people, to guide people. Women's rights is all over the Torah wherever you turn. I remember years ago, now today sexual harassment is big news. I remember about 25 years ago I went to a weekend retreat And it had two great legal minds as the scholar in residences of this retreat. It was chief rabbi, it wasn't chief rabbi, one of the chief Talmudists of in Israel named Rabbi Steinsaltz. You may have heard of Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz. Adin, one of the gifted minds of the Talmud today. And there was then Supreme Court Justice Anthony Scalia. Scalia and Steinsaltz together for a Shabbos. The debates were wild. I mean, these were two gifted minds. Whatever you think of Scalia, whatever you thought of Scalia, no one ever questions his intelligence. And imagine Steinsaltz and Scalia on the stage. 1,000 attorneys. 1,000 Jewish attorneys in the room with these two. It was unbelievable. But throughout the weekend there were these smaller breakup workshops of, again, dialogue, legal scholars and rabbis together. One of the sessions was on sexual harassment in the workplace. And it was Professor Laurie Levinson and Rabbi Adlerstein. Those were the two. And Professor Laurie Levinson gets up and makes her case against sexual harassment in the workplace. We need to establish new laws. We need to have laws in the workplace. It's important, on and on. And Rabbi Adlerstein gets up and he says, you want me to argue against that? I mean, who organizes what? Am I supposed to stand up and say, no, sexual harassment is good in the workplace? He says, the only thing I would like to say is that every law that you just asked for that needs to make its way through the state legislature, the Talmud said thousands of years ago. Everything that you said that is needed in the workplace to protect women in the workplace, the Talmud thought about thousands of years ago. The more we study it, the more we understand how much was put into Torah, into Judaism, how much information of ammunition was given to us to combat anything that will come our way in society. The Torah taught us and we taught the world that family must be the priority. That ultimately the greatest gift in the world is our family, far more important than our career. I'll throw out something else. Judaism taught the world and taught all religions that there's a concept of repentance. That's a Jewish concept. That if you fail, it doesn't mean it's over. You're not condemned to hell because you sinned. You're human if you sin. And that's why we have a day called Yom Kippur, and that's why every night before we go to sleep we ask forgiveness if we've sinned against anyone. The idea of prayer is a Jewish concept. We don't monopolize these concepts. We shared it with the world. That there's any place of worship today anywhere in the world is because there was a Jewish people given this responsibility of being a chosen people to share these blessings with the world. That a human being can pray to an infinite God is a Jewish concept. That's accepted by the entire world. That we do things that are right even if it's not popular. And one more revolution. The revolution of the United States of America. The revolution of there being this place on earth where all people will actually have these freedoms. Why do I say this is a Jewish concept? If you study early American history, you will find that the founding fathers studied the Torah, studied the Talmud, and created a country that lived by these ideals. Not a Jewish country, not that the people would convert to Judaism, but that they would take the ideals of Judaism and build a country around it. This is the greatest gift we gave the world. This is how we have been a chosen people, even if we didn't realize we were influencing a world. All early universities studied Hebrew, spoke Hebrew, studied the Talmud. Our legal system is based on biblical and Talmudic law. Our government, of there being an executive branch, a judicial branch, a legislative branch, is part of the book of Deuteronomy. All of these are Jewish concepts. These are the results of us being, just being, living as a Jew. The world learned, the world saw, the world was inspired. And through all of our history, we held onto this Torah dearly. We studied it, we practiced it, we brought its themes into living color, we sacrificed for it, we even died for it. But we made sure to pass it on to our children and to our grandchildren until this very day. No nation survived what we survived. And yet we're here. Look at us. Could you believe that we're within 100 years where there was a Holocaust? that destroyed and devastated our people and brought us face to face with humanity in its lowest form. And look at us today. Look how far we've come. Look how advanced we've come. So have we done a good job? We've done a very good job. Can we do better? We'll all do better. Tomorrow, we'll do a little better. Each day, a little better. Thank you for joining us tonight. We look forward to continuing Living Judaism next Wednesday night at 8 o'clock.